Welcome everyone to this week's Future Strong. I can't believe, Lindsay, we're on episode 7 and we've made it into February, where the sunlight in the UK is beaming, but I know the snow and the rain has come to yourself and Ray. So it's unusual that the tables have turned in my direction. For those of you that haven't listened before, my name's Nikki Garchea and I'm one of the co-founders of a business called Capfinity. We're a global business providing strengths-based solutions across recruitment and development globally. And I have had the pleasure of working with Lindsay over the last 12 months, interviewing global leaders, really looking at how we can give insights to the emerging talent population, both individuals who are seeking jobs, but also within career services and global recruiters. And Future Strong's come out of that research just so we can, at these times, share insights that will help these generations who are looking for work and going through education. So over to you, Lindsay. I know you've had another busy week and there is snowfall around you.
There is snowfall in rural Connecticut. It does not stop the trains going by. Ray, I live on Railroad Street, so just so you know that we always prepare for the train interruption. Welcome to Lucky 7 episode. It's such a pleasure to be your co-host, Nikki. I'm Lindsay Pollock. I'm the author of 4 career advice books. The latest is Recalculating, Navigate Your Career Through the Changing World of Work. And I am a proud ambassador for Capfinity's V platform to help companies recruit diverse talent and to help young people land jobs that are best fit for their strengths. Speaking of young people who are looking to land jobs and help diversify the U.S. workforce, today we welcome Reyes of the Opportunity Network. He is based in New York City. He has grown a beard, which we're hoping that he will tell us a little bit about. Ray, if you could introduce yourself, and for people who aren't familiar with the Opportunity Network, can you talk a little bit about what you do? Thanks for being with us.
Sure. Thanks for having me. And we'll talk about the beard a little bit later.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks.
Managing Director of Programs at the Opportunity Network. So we ignite the drive, curiosity, and agency of students from historically underrepresented and systematically underrepresented communities to connect them to college access and success, internships, career opportunities, and personal and professional networks. And we do that through 2 key programs: our 6-year fellowship that starts working with New York City public high school students summer after 10th grade until college graduation, so that's about 6 years. And through our Capacity Partnerships program, where we partner with community-based organizations and nonprofits across the nation to present our career fluency content to affect the underrepresented communities. So it's been a great journey working at OpNet. I've been at the organization for 11 years and been able to see the growth, working with more students and working with students outside of New York City as well. So it's been really nice. And like you said, over the past 11 months, I tried to grow a beard. It's almost connected. So I think 3 more months and I'll be in with some of the rest of my colleagues on the team.
I love it. We did sort of chit chat before this episode of how the 3 of us got acquainted, which is through Trudy Steinfeld. Who else could it be through? Can you tell us a little bit about your background at NYU and elsewhere before Opportunity Network?
Sure. So I met Trudy. Initially, I was a graduate assistant at NYU in the admissions office, and Trudy's daughter also worked in the admissions office. And Trudy was actually kind of like a myth as the
myth?
As the head of career services at NYU that could get anyone a job. And I randomly ran into Trudy one day, and she asked me if I wanted to volunteer in her office. So the volunteer position, I shadowed career counselors, shadowed programs around resumes, interviewing, on-campus recruitment. I had no idea what on-campus recruitment was. I didn't even know what investment bank was at that point. I was in grad school, obviously. And then I got an internship in Trudy's office, career services, that led to a full-time position working as a career counselor. Then I started working as manager of the diversity program, so working with the employers that were interested in recruiting diverse talent at NYU through internship programs and other early career programs. So really just got my start at the Washington Center at NYU. A lot of people, including Trudy, others, Serby Law, Melissa Brodsky, Bob Capras. I can give a lot of shout outs, but I think those individuals from everyone at the office that I work with there really just helped me learn, I guess, how to go to work, how to work, understanding the values, finding a values aligned position, how to think about the workforce. Trudy definitely was ahead of her time. She was talking to me about widgets, which eventually became apps, and Twitter in 2005. So I was like, what is this? I don't know what this is. So, that start at Wasserman really kicked off my passion for career development.
Thanks, Ray. It's great to. Trudy will be, I hope, enjoying the shout outs. She does have a top strength in connector, which did validate our strengths profile instrument when she took it. So I was really pleased that was her number one strength. Ray, it'd be great just to hear a little bit about the two programs that you mentioned. Maybe start with the foundation, and I'm really interested in the ethos of the length of time that the different programs spend with students and the thinking behind some of the frameworks that you're using with them.
Sure. So with our 6-year fellowship, we're recruiting students in the 10th grade year of high school, and then they complete the program once they graduate from college. So it's 6 years, as I mentioned. And what our founder saw, Jessica Pliska, when she initially started the organization was, number one, students from underrepresented communities didn't have access to a number of resources that she did, and some of her peers. She comes from a good family. I've met her parents, a good family, and also went to Yale, as Lindsay knows, and came out of college, had access to certain networks, professional opportunities, and with her friend Brian Weinstein decided, had a conversation. What about some of the other students that come out from other schools, from public schools, so on and so forth. So she started the organization and also noticed that there weren't a lot of organizations that followed high school students through college. So there are some organizations that are awesome that follow students through high school to get them to college, and there are other organizations that follow students through a few years of college and maybe just start in college. But what we wanted to do with our organization was make sure that the students who were excited about college, excited about careers, had that support in high school, had that exposure to know what's possible, and then were supported once they get to college, because it still isn't just enough to say, okay, I'm going to college and now I'm going to get a job or I'm going to figure out a career. You do need that additional support, and you also need to have access to that hidden curriculum that usually is just certain people are aware and certain people are not, and then also access to resources, because you really just don't know what you don't know. And then from there, once you do have all of the information, you can make the choices and define success for yourself. So typically in high school, we act as an after-school program, so that young people are coming to us once a week after school. In 11th grade, it's a crash course into our career fluency content. So how to put together a resume, how to market your assets, how to think about your identity, how to use an asset-based approach when thinking about your future. A little bit of an introduction to higher education. In 12th grade, a deep dive into higher education. So applying for college, we have a college essay coach, looking at different colleges that young people want to apply to. They have individual guidance sessions with our college guidance team. And then we start our transition to college workshops in the spring. They're going on right now with the 12th graders. And then there's also, we have a college transition boot camp that happens between summer 12th grade and the first year of college. And then we also offer support. So our 12th grade team works with the first years, so that it's a continuation. So there's that relationship there. Then we also have a college success team that creates content that the students engage with from first year of college all the way through. And a really nice component of our program is from the summer after junior year of high school through the summer before senior year of college, they're eligible for summer internships and enrichment programs. So we have a career success team that places the students in the summer opportunities each summer.
The thoroughness of it is just so extraordinary. I mean, I think everybody should go through something, certainly people from underrepresented groups. Ray, how's it going virtually? I know that young people are obviously comfortable with technology, but there's a lot that maybe doesn't translate. So I'm curious how it's been through the past 12 months.
I would say we are doing the best that we can. So we have a curriculum team that has a very thoughtful approach around youth participatory action research, culturally responsive content, and also teaching for social justice. And that was put together when we were in person, and then we tried our best to translate it over into our online content. So we're using Zoom as a platform, and also we have another platform called Uninterrupted, which we transitioned all of our in-person lessons onto that platform and made them palatable and useful in that space. And we're, as a after-school program in high school, and also with the asynchronous content that we use, I think we're doing really well. But at the same time, there's a lot lost in the virtual space. So the connections that are made in person in a workshop setting or a classroom setting, also the connections between the young people. So there's ways to make connections on Zoom, but you can't do that. It's not like being in person. And then also just speaking to different learning styles. Virtual learning, unfortunately, is somewhat limited in the capacity to connect depending on someone's learning style. So we're also trying to figure out how we can get ahead of the curve. We're looking at a lot of research from the Student Support, Student Success Network, other literature out there that's coming out because school and everything else is virtual. But I would say it's going well. Our attendance is great right now with our students there. I thought they would not want to kind of do a virtual lunchroom cafe. We're going to do a virtual bus ride for our annual college trip, and the students seem pumped about it. So it's going as well as it can, but we do know that there also is this sense of loss, with not having some of the key OpNet milestones, and also just not having a prom or not having a homecoming or not having a college graduation. So we're still trying to manage some of that, knowing that we can't recreate everything in a virtual setting.
We've heard that a lot this week, haven't we, Lindsay, about the milestones and those missing and just a real sadness around it. So great that you're managing to capture some of that, but such a shame that for many people they're not there. Ray, something that many people have asked me recently is around the timing of these programs from a kind of age perspective. And I'm really interested that you mention kind of 10th grade. Any kind of insights into working with 10th graders on these topics? How do they go down? How do we keep people interested? And I think for our organizations listening, I think it's a real insight into actually that you can do things at 10th grade, because I think people often start maybe much later than that. But any insights of working with that age group?
I would say I'm constantly surprised by our high school students and the students that come into our program. We always do a resume workshop where the students go through the things that they would like to put on their first OpNet resume. And I'm consistently blown away by the experiences that they already have. When I was in 10th grade, I cut grass in the summertime. And they've done internships, they volunteered for politicians, they worked in family businesses, they've done a lot of really cool things. So I think the biggest thing is just not to underestimate the population and really think about what they do bring to the table, and then trying to communicate to them how to market that and how to think about that as an asset. And I would also say to just think, when working with the population that we do work with, just young people in general, just figuring out how to make it relatable. A lot of times it's very hard to think about, when I'm in 10th or 11th grade, what life is going to be like after college graduation. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to write this paper. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to make a little bit of money to support whatever it is my financial needs are at the moment. So how can you really just connect the dots and say, this is why this investment of your time is important in the short term, but also in the long term? And how is this related to your current circumstances? And think about as well who you already have in your social capital network, social space, in addition to the people that you want to meet, and really just trying to use that asset-based approach and working with them.
So you've been doing this a long time. You said you've been with OpNet for 11 years. You're in career services before that. When you think sort of from a 30,000 foot view of the trends that you've seen about, I think it's a huge difference. I worked at a video store in high school. You were cutting grass. I was a camp counselor. And now kids, like you said, are doing internships, when they're 10 years old, it seems like. What are some of the other big trends that you've seen? And what I'm actually really interested in too is the kinds of companies or industries that young people are interested in, whether they're thinking about entrepreneurship, over the longer term. What do you think are some of those sort of bigger term trends?
I think the shift that I've seen, honestly, is the shift from, I need a job, so I'm going to do whatever it is that I possibly can to get a job and keep a job, to the mindset that the employer needs me and they need to do what they need to do to retain me because I have a lot of options. I think that has a lot to do with the economy, where the economy was, and even somewhat now still kind of is for entry-level employees. It's obviously, we know, with the record numbers of unemployment, changes in industry. So we'll have to see how things shake out for the rest of this year and future. But for the past few years, it's really just been like, I have a lot of options. And especially when you see a lot of recruiters were already thinking about trying to diversify the workforce, you're looking at a smaller pool of people. So they're essentially going into these opportunities saying, also pitch me. Like, I'm going to pitch myself. I'm going to come in. I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to show up early. I'm going to do my research. I'm going to be the best person that I can for this opportunity. But I have like 6 or 7 other opportunities as well. And they want to really make sure that it's extremely value aligned. And I think we saw that last summer with a lot of companies making certain statements and thinking about how they're responding to the racial injustice that was going on in the United States. There was a big call out to say, okay, it's great that you're doing a commercial. It's great that you have a statement, but what are you doing with your board of directors? What are you doing with your workforce? So I think the biggest shift that I've seen is that the younger talent, or just talent in general, want to make sure that where they're working is value aligned to what they want to see in the world. And that may not necessarily have been as vocal back when I started working in career services in like 2008, especially right after the market had crashed and it was just kind of like a scramble to find a job. There was passion there, and I definitely saw it with the NYU students and my peers, but it wasn't as direct and straightforward as I see it today.
I'm just going to hop into this one because it's such a big topic, particularly for the recruiters at the moment. And I think we are hearing this student voice around asking all of those questions and acknowledging that, you know, a commercial is not enough. Do you see, and you don't need to name the name of the organizations, but do you either see, Ray, any organizations where you think actually they've been doing good work from attracting diverse students and unrepresented students for some time, and maybe a couple of examples of what they're doing, or maybe some of your students recommending organizations? I'd love to hear thematically if there's anything that you hear organizations do well, or ones that appeal to your students.
I would say holistically, the organizations that do it well are focusing on EQ, so that emotional intelligence, and what that means in the recruiting space, and also what that means when someone gets hired at an organization, and also companies that are focusing on the issue or just focusing on their workforce, not only from their entry level talent that they're recruiting, but the talent that's currently at the company, and looking at various levels. So not just saying, let's hire interns or let's hire entry level staff, but really looking at mid-level, looking at the C-suite, looking at the board of directors and saying, what can we really do? I would say a few companies that come to mind would be Nike. I think Nike's doing a really good job outside of just the marketing aspect and just spend money on our stuff because we support Colin Kaepernick or we support Serena Williams, but really looking at the workforce. I also think that some of the companies that the students are really passionate about are more social justice oriented, more in a support field. So, you know, in the nonprofit space, but there are obviously some issues as well when you think about the board of directors in the nonprofit space. But overall, I would say the companies that are doing it well are just focusing on the sense of belonging at the company, number one, and then not just focusing on let's just get talent in the door that are interns and entry level, but let's look across the spectrum and how we can diversify.
You saw Nikki and I both respond when you said the word belonging. We have been doing a lot of interviews, and that word has come up so frequently related to diversity, equity, inclusion, but also just the pandemic and remote work. Can we really dig into that? You know, what did the students tell you makes them feel a sense of belonging? What are some tactics, if there were a recruiter listening or someone inside a company, what are some tactical things that they can do to create that sense of belonging? It's somewhat intangible, but I think there are very tactical things that probably move the needle. What would you advise?
I would say first and foremost, just having a certain level of cultural competency for whatever populations that you're going to be working with, whether that's your people you're working with that are already at the company or organization, and also the recruiting pool. So whatever trainings can happen in that space around, unconscious bias, just essentially just overall cultural competency. So that way, you're avoiding some of the tokenism that may arise when you're saying, okay, we need to diversify the staff first, and we're going to also talk about equity and inclusion. And then we just kind of go out and we say, okay, well, we need more Black people, or we need more women, or, so that I think you run the risk of sometimes tokenizing the individual when they come in the door. So just having that cultural competency. So when you're marketing to individuals, when you're having conversations with individuals, when you're putting together programs at the organization. And I also think thinking about when it comes to belonging, what have people's experiences been at the company? And what are some of the things that you see need to essentially change in order to create conditions for people to succeed? And thinking about, are there affinity groups present? If not, what are some of the affinity groups that might be needed to provide that level of support? And how can we make sure that there is true engagement and essentially communicating across the board why this is important? So I think if you want to make sure that it not only resonates with the people that you're hiring, with the people that kind of look like you, identify with you, but also the other people that are at the company or organization. And then just trying to avoid this idea that we're going to hire talent and they're going to assimilate to our situation, whatever that might be, because I think there are certain things that exist that are problematic. And if we know that they're problematic, you don't want people to assimilate that and perpetuate some of these things. You want to address them, and you can't address it overnight. We've been dealing with systemic racism for however many hundreds of years in the United States anyway, and we can talk about the globe, but we can't just come in and have a conversation about unconscious bias and everything else and then change everything overnight, so that there's not just going to be a quick fix and have people kind of sit in that level of uncomfort at the same time as bringing people in and doing the work around belonging.
I don't want to change the subject too much, but the train is going by, so I thought if maybe it blew its horn again, you would get to hear it. I don't know can you see it a little bit through the window?
I saw that.
Likes to make a cameo during the talk. But Nikki, over to you for the next question.
I can hear the train. We got that, Lindsay. Just changing tack slightly, and I want to go back to the work that you're involved in. Much of that is around aspects of career fluency, and I just wondered if you'd share, Ray, just some examples of what kind of career fluency looks like, things that people can be considering in developing in that way.
Sure. So a lot of what we focus on in career fluency is around awareness, exposure, skill building, so on and so forth. So we try to use a scaffolded approach where it's this gradual release of information and also gradual release of responsibility. So starting summer before 11th grade, when the students go through our summer institute, all the way up until they graduate from college. So thinking about, like I mentioned, marketing your assets. So what skills do you currently have? How are you marketing them? And how are you thinking about those skills and how they could be transferable or applicable in a variety of different spaces? Also, eventually, we don't want to introduce this right away, but the concept of employability. So there's key concepts. I'm sure YouTube, probably not everyone in the world, but NACE has a lot of employability pieces, and we focus a lot on that because you're essentially trying to prepare for jobs that you don't know that are available, and you're also trying to prepare for this ever-changing workplace, and also preparing for when you eventually define success. So that goes back into, as I mentioned, the assets that you have, understanding the skills and assets that you need to build, how to go about building them. We integrate social capital throughout to make sure that this young people understand what social capital is, like the mutually beneficial relationship. So it's a two-way street, and how you can give back to those networks, and also how you can use the networks that you have at your disposal, not as to be an opportunist, but to create this system of everyone kind of helping everyone else. And then also just thinking about how you define success. Like, I think, to jump back, a lot of times it used to be, well, get a job at Goldman Sachs, you're successful now, or get a job doing, working at NYU or whatever. Like, I define the success by placing a value on that, but really starting early to let the young people know, let's really figure out your career values. Let's think about your interests. Let's think about what you want your quality of life to be. Let's think about the skills you need to build, and then how can you go off and define success for you in the future. And that doesn't mean like you graduate from college, you're automatically your CEO. You graduate from college, you're automatically this huge entrepreneur that starts this great new business. But what are the things that you need to do? And then how do you define that success and put that path together? And that includes the career fluency content, thinking about college access, thinking about college success, thinking about all the other things, resume building, making sure that, you're prepared for interviews, some of that hidden curriculum, thank you emails, thank you notes, following up, how to advocate for yourself, how to understand how your identity plays into some of these things, the cultural competency across different cultures and different races and different backgrounds as well, because we also have a very diverse population in our fellows program, and we work with a diverse population through our partnership. So it's not just thinking about, one identity, whether it be gender, race, ethnicity, how did that all play into the puzzle as well?
God, it's such a brilliant concept. I'm thinking of, I had the opportunity to interview one of the founders of Take Our Daughters to Work Day. And she said some of the girls would show up at an office. They'd never been to an office building before, and they were so intimidated they left. I mean, it's just that you don't even think about the levels, that somebody might know. Ray, I want to talk about something that you kind of, it was like a brief remark, and you kind of brought it back at the Goldman Sachs, that when you were at NYU, you had never heard of investment banking. And I remember when I was at Yale, I'm like, what is McKinsey? Like I don't understand. Like, I've never heard of this before. And suddenly everybody is wearing t-shirts from there. When you think about the industries that recruit, right, and what's considered successful and top talent, there's so much talk now about coding and jobs of the future and AI, and then we get a lot of questions from maybe old school manufacturing or insurance companies. How do I stay competitive? Can you just talk a little bit about industry choice and how young people are learning, particularly from your programs and those from underrepresented groups, how they're thinking about industries? Because I think there's this sort of temptation to go towards only technology, but there's so much out there. So, how are you approaching that? Or what do you hear students talk about when it comes to those choices?
Well, we're approaching it by doing a lot of providing a lot of information about it really comes down to like the anatomy of the business, right? So pretty much every business, or every entity is going to have certain departments. So not just to say, okay, well, I want to work in tech. Well, if you want to work in tech, like Google has a legal department, Google has a marketing department, Google has pretty much every department that you can think of, in addition to people who do a lot of things that I don't really understand. But there's a lot there. And the same thing with a nonprofit. Like we have a finance team, we have human resources, we have so many different teams. We have Grace, who another NYU alum, who does all of our social media and our communications, and so we have that. So all that to say is we try to lay that foundation early to say, just because you say you want to work in tech, does that mean you want to work for a big tech company? Does that mean you want to work in technology? What does technology mean to you? Do you want to work in business? Okay, you want to work in nonprofit. Are you interested in recidivism? Are you interested in education? Like, what exactly do you want to hone in on, and not trying to force them at 15, 16, or even 21 to figure that out? Just make sure that that level of awareness is there. I would say what we usually hear from the students is that there are certain companies that do it a little better in terms of marketing opportunities and marketing culture and what seems fun and exciting. And there still is that tension between, I need a job, so like I only have but so many choices in what's offered to me. But I think what I'm hearing right now is that it goes back to whatever it is that the young people want to do. They want to feel like it's value aligned, and it's less often now that I want to follow my passions on the weekends and I'm going to volunteer after work. There's some level of integration into what I'm passionate about into the profession, which is fine, or into my career. So that means that students are going back and looking for opportunities that feel meaningful to them, and however they define that. And I would say tech is always going to be big. Every year we have a few students that go into tech and are along that spectrum, but we're seeing a lot of the more social services opportunity, social, nonprofit giving back, helping professions are really on the rise, creative in the arts. And then where we're trying to also make sure is removing the stigma around, well, if you go in a nonprofit, if you go into a creative space, you're not going to make any money. The first step is, okay, well, what is any money? What does a lot of money mean to you? Let's do some financial literacy and kind of build a budget to see what you need to support yourself. Let's have you talk to some people in your network, or we can connect you to people through OpNet so you can see what their experience has been like in the field, and you can think about what you want to major in and what you want to do in the college years around internships. So I think that's really where we've seen the trend, is the more creative, nonprofit helping education. But we still have every year, a few students that go work on Wall Street, or they go work in insurance, or Google, or Grubhub, or along those lines. So.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. And with our strengths profile tool last year, we saw a big rise in strengths of gratitude and service within these younger populations. So I can see why they would be going into those types of jobs as well. It's interesting to see that you're kind of identifying a similar trend. Ray, we had Bob Atwell on maybe 3 episodes ago, was it, Lindsay? And Bob spoke quite passionately about really wanting to see whether organizations were going to measure their distance traveled when it came to diversity initiatives. So kind of seeing what they've done in 2020, but really maybe putting some serious plans together for 21. I know that you have, is it Opportunity Ignited? And I wondered if you'd speak a little bit about that, and if there's anything that we can direct listeners to so they can find out more about this initiative. It'd be great just to hear a bit more.
Sure. So as I mentioned, well, I'm sure everyone's aware of, there was, continues to be racial injustice in the United States. And with the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, a lot of the response, was noteworthy. And a lot of our partners and employer partners across the nation wanted to, begin the conversation with hiring interns and, diversifying the internship pool. And a lot of our partners did come to OpNet saying, we worked with you for years, you have, talent that represents diversity. Can we start, filling some of our internship programs with your students? Okay, great. We've been doing it for years. That's awesome. We have a lot of lessons learned from placing students of color in internships and entry-level positions since 2003. And the conversation should center around the sense of belonging. So how do we change some of these conditions at your company, at your place of employment, to make sure that students feel supported and they can thrive, or entry-level talent can feel supported and can thrive? So not just saying, okay, we'll connect you to our talent, and we'll have them go through your pipeline and convert to interns and hopefully full-time. How can we work with you as a thought partner, as a learning partner, to really change some of those conditions? So my boss, Eileen, our CEO, I know a few of other members of the team started working on Opportunity Ignited, where we're working with our employer partners really to think about how to work with them to learn, design, and build inclusive workplaces, to hire, onboard, and retain first-gen college students and talent of color in, like, as I mentioned, summer internships and full-time jobs. So we have different levels of engagement. So our corporate membership level, entry level, which is working with different employers to have volunteers come into our volunteer sessions, be featured to students in ways that are going to encourage them to want to work at the organization, or also just be aware of opportunities. And then going much deeper. So we have three additional levels where we're working to do culture mapping. So understanding the culture at the company, understanding what people are talking about, thinking about what it really truly takes to get an intern to CEO. So what are the conditions that need to happen, and how can we partner to make sure that that does happen? Creating content for not only the managers, the manager training, supervisor trainings, so that they're thinking about cultural competency, unconscious bias, different things that need to happen to support an intern, entry level talent, but all talent, all people at the company really engaging with this through asynchronous modules, synchronous modules, trainings, and then doing deeper dives to make sure it's a approach that connects everyone at the organization. So not just, as I mentioned, the managers and maybe more entry level talent, but the C-suite, managers, all across the organization, and then having engagements once interns start to be able to have these conversations and have cohorts of the interns kind of producing things, not specifically around diversity, but producing projects that really create value and create impact at the company. So this is our first year doing it. We have about 14 clients that we're working with, and it kicked off very quickly, and we saw this is something that it is fee for service, where we're making sure that there is a true commitment to making that change and creating that sense of belonging, and also making sure that people understand, but once again, that this isn't overnight. We're not just going to come in, have a survey that your staff does, do culture mapping engagements, once or twice, have a kickoff for your interns, have managers trainings, and creating the content that you engage with virtually for 45 minutes, and talk to your affinity groups, and talk to or create learning groups. And then September 21, we've figured out racism, or we figured out gender discrimination. That's not how it works. So just kind of really making sure that we set the stage for that, and also saying this is not a true diversity consultancy. We're coming in as a learning partner, speaking to our expertise of placing students of color in these positions, as I mentioned, since 2003.
So many people come on this show and say, what we really need are holistic solutions. And it strikes me that what Opportunity Network has created is holistic solutions, from 10th grade to full adulthood, to working with the students in high school, to college, through to the employers and internships. I think it's so holistic. And it sounds like this Diversity Ignited, Opportunity Ignited, tell me again, Opportunity Ignited, excuse me, Opportunity Ignited just really kind of completes that circle. So thank you so much for the work that you do. Nikki.
Yeah, just to echo that, I was sat back, and I think holistic's the perfect word, Lindsay. It's such a mature approach that Opportunity Network have. And Ray, thank you to be so giving with your time, but your insights as well. It's going to be fantastic for everyone listening and listening back to this series, just to have so many practical takeaways. So it's great to have you with us. I think we could have spoken to you for a lot longer. We may be inviting you back. So
I want to see the beard. I want to see the evolution of the beard.
We should definitely look at that distance travel. That's another metric we should add.
I'll set up some KPIs for my beard.
We definitely shared the Opportunity Network Instagram, so if the beard could feature, that would be wonderful.
I'm a little worried about that. I think my colleague Keith has me beat with
Team Ray.
Criteria. The other thing I just wanted to say to the listeners was that the Opportunity Network website, particularly the insights pages, just gives great kind of practical tips. So I would direct anyone to those to look through and just be able to see the blogs and the things that the team there are sharing. Wonderful to have you with us, Ray. We look forward to speaking to you again. And Lindsay, we look forward to being together next week. I think we have, is it Fred Burke next week?
We have Fred Burke and Yulia from Greylock talking about the experience of being first-gen college students, which obviously very similar to the work of Opportunity Network, and we look forward to having them.
Well, I think Fred is in the chat, so he's got a big act to follow, Ray. We look forward to putting some hard questions to him, and please, anyone chat with us or tweet questions for next week as well. Have a great weekend, and we look forward to episode 8. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.